Hello and welcome to Tech Retrospective. I'm your host Jacob, and today I get to brag. Specifically, I'm going to be bragging a little bit about our computer collection. We have a ton of computers in our collection, but some of them are rarer than others. You know, it's not that impressive that we own a Commodore 64. So today, we're going to look at 5 of the computers in our collection that I consider to be quite rare. This isn't a definitive, these are the rarest computers in our collection, because defining what rarity means is a bit tricky. Does it mean number of systems sold, or does it mean the value of a system now, the demand for it? So take this more as, here are 5 really cool rare computers in our collection. And of course, let me know if you own any rare computers. Do you own any cool prototype computers or just systems that are in high demand? Are you sitting on an original Apple I? Let me know in the comments down below. Number 5, the Atari 1200 XL. At number 5 is a system that earns its place due primarily to its short lifespan. The Atari 1200 XL was only produced for 4 months in 1983, due primarily to its high cost and inability to compete with the bargain that was the Commodore 64. I won't get into the weeds too much, since we did recently do a full video on the Atari 1200 XL, which you can watch here, but looking at the low sales of the system and the high demand from Atari collectors today, it's not surprising that they can get pretty expensive. Number 4, the Epson HX20. This system is actually one of my favorites in our collection. The Epson HX20 is a landmark machine for portable computing, and it's just really cool, you know? With its built-in thermal printer and tape drive, it just looks interesting. This machine is quite rare, primarily due to the market for portable computers being very small in the early 80s, and the Epson brand being pretty obscure, especially when it comes to computers. Still, it is a great system. Number 3, the Tandy 600. The Tandy 600 is one of the oddest computers Tandy ever sold. It's clearly derived in its design from the legendary Tandy 100 and Tandy 200, but it features a completely different internal architecture. It uses an 8088 processor, but it's not IBM compatible at all, which is the primary reason this system failed. By 1985, very few people were looking to spend $1,600 on a laptop that lacked software compatibility with their work or home PCs. This was the case of a system that did in fact improve on the previous generations and has a great form factor, but didn't fill the needs of the changing market, making it one of the worst selling portables Tandy ever released, which is why it's so rare today. Number 2, the Grid 325 SC. If you've never heard of Grid before, I'm not surprised, but they have an iconic legacy as a major innovator in the high-end portable computer market in the 1980s, patenting and popularizing the clamshell laptop design that we still use today. In 1988, they were bought by Tandy, who then used the brand name to sell computers to the high-end workstation and industrial equipment markets. Typically, these computers were custom components with a grid label on a standard Tandy case. Despite looking very similar to many Tandy computer models of the era, these computers weren't the type to be found in Tandy's catalogs or Radio Shack stores. Not the type of thing a typical consumer could buy, which makes them all quite rare. I had to choose one of our Grid systems to show off today, and I chose this Grid 325 SC, which sold for a starting price of $2,200 in 1991, with a fully spec'd system selling for over 10 grand. This system's big selling point was its choice of CPU, using a 25 MHz AMD AM386 chipset. This CPU was fully 386 compatible, but was also more efficient, as it was AMD's first real attempt at making their own competing chip designs separate from Intel's designs, something they are still doing successfully to this day. So take a very obscure computer brand that consumers did not have access to and make one of the more niche, out there spec'd systems, and you've got a recipe for a very rare computer. But it's not the rarest we own, I think. It's hard to say when you get to these computers that are so rare it's virtually hard to find listings for them. But this might be the rarest, and that is number 1, the Franklin Ace PC 8000. On the surface, this might appear to be just one of many clones of the IBM PC that were everywhere in the mid-80s, and yeah, that's exactly what it is. What makes this particular system interesting, besides its fantastic aesthetics, is the Franklin label on it. Franklin was well known in the 80s for their excellent Apple II clones. Those systems ended up getting Franklin into quite the legal bind, so Franklin attempted to pivot to IBM clones. But this system never stood out amongst the wide crowd of IBM PC clones, and Franklin ended up exiting the PC market entirely soon after releasing it, making this one of the rarest PC clones out there, which makes it even cooler that we have this one pristine in its box. Well, those are 5 of the rarest computers in our collection. We have done videos on several of these already, so be sure to check those out. And the ones that don't have videos yet, they're in the works, of course. So be on the lookout for that. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss them when they do come out. And if you'd like to discuss anything rare computer related, make sure to join our Facebook group. And finally, if you'd like to help keep this show running, you can support us on our Patreon. And I will see you guys next time.